All right, welcome back to the Heavenly Bread podcast. That is the first time I've ever said that, actually.
Dang.
And I almost said our other one, but
we made it.
It's okay. We're going on the journey together.
Yes.
I hope that you guys listened to the previous episode and just heard our heart behind the name change. And really the whole episode. I loved this. It was the intro to Charissa being here on the show. So definitely, if you haven't watched the first one, just go back and listen to that one first right now, and then jump in with us again here in episode 2. So, Charissa, what's our mission statement for this podcast, by the way?
Oh my gosh. It made me so nervous. It's okay. Jesus people.
That's right.
Having Jesus conversations to provoke greater love for Jesus.
There it is.
It's a little switch.
A little switch. From stories to more conversations.
Yes.
And so it works out great because now we got the co-host dynamic going
Conversations
are going to be having. And we'll still do some stories along the way and bring people on and all that good stuff. But so we talked about in the last episode, just, basically a little bit about the transition out here to Upper Room Denver and being in the prayer room, a little bit about our ministry, in the prayer room ministry dynamic. We didn't really mention this, but kind of Monday through Thursday, we're in there from 6 a.m. to noon, sometimes through 1 o'clock on Thursdays, because our girl Dana,
the prophetess,
she does her Devo from noon to 1. So we love to stay in there for her set. And so that's a big chunk of our day to start the day off, first 4 days of the week, either 6 or 7 hours in the place of prayer, in the place of worship. Explain to them just a little bit, what are you doing in the room specifically during those hours?
Yeah, I think there can be a bit of a different dynamic every day, but I'm on about 5 prayer sets right now. So there's a lot of
which means you're on stage for those sets.
Yes, leading from the platform. So really, I think my first hour I get in there, I'm usually just get in there, receive from the Lord, be still, hear his voice, prepare. If I'm having certain scriptures we're going to go into for those sets for the days, I'm reading over those, letting the Lord breathe fresh revelation. And then there's just practically that we have pre-briefs and debriefs of the set. So it's getting getting the teams unified around just what the Lord has put on our hearts for that week. And then with all of that, we always hold it open-handed for the Lord to come and lead however he wants. But really, when we're worshiping corporately, I think it's the corporate element is so important, and being conscious of that, of I'm not just here to meet with the Lord with just me, that's your secret place stuff, but we're here as a people to encounter the glory of God, to respond to him, and just to welcome him to come and have his way. So there's practically musical preparation, leading, whether it's singing, we're making sure to get up on the mic for intercession, to go the same place as a room.
So sometimes you're in the room and you're sitting in the stands or in the chairs and you're just receiving, you're reading the scriptures, or you're praying, you're agreeing with what's happening. Other times you're leading the worship from the stage. Other times you're praying on the microphone, during the intercession times. Other times you're doing a Devo set.
Yeah.
And so I can pretty much say the same thing about myself.
Yeah.
I don't do as much worship leading, even though I will be on the teams playing acoustic guitar. Both of us have early morning Devo sets.
Yeah.
And so one of the cool things, I love being on your worship team specifically. It's I feel like in our just personal relationship, there's sometimes where maybe I'm leading out in what we're doing, the ministry we're doing, or there's other times where you're leading out.
That's true.
And I kind of like that dynamic. We both have opportunities to follow each other's leadership and support whoever's leading out. And it's fun being able to do this lifestyle together. That was something that was important to me, even when praying about who could we get to come onto the team here. as the social media director. I wanted it to be someone who I was doing life with in community. And not only do you carry so much of the same heart, but like we've explained, we're in the prayer room together all the time with the rest of the crew, of course. And so it's fun. I personally feel like that right there is so much of my dream job.
Yeah.
For
real.
I love getting to preach. I love getting to do the podcast like we're doing now and everything that comes with Heavenly Bread Ministries. But it's like what we get to do in that prayer room, whether we're leading worship, whether we're prayer leading, whether we're in the room just receiving. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
And I pray that that's always true. I even had, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before, but I had a dream back when I was in Kansas City. This was probably 4 years ago, where in the dream I was playing a pickup basketball game with some friends. And then I was like, all right, guys, I got to go to work. And so I left the game and literally just walked onto worship leading stage and started, leading the set from my guitar. And I just woke up and I was like, I can't remember my exact thoughts, but I was like, I wonder if at some point that will be my reality.
Wow.
In which I got to go to work and I'm going to the prayer room.
It's amazing.
Isn't that kind of awesome?
Like it. Yeah.
And so to be like living that, it's like a dream come true, literally too.
Wow.
But I just kind of thought throughout this episode specifically, we would kind of just dive into what has the Lord been, touching our hearts with in the scriptures, in the prayer room over the last 8 weeks, because that's about the amount of time we've been here in Denver doing this stuff. So what specifically has there been like a theme for you and your personal walk with the Lord, or something maybe on Sunday night services, something in our Bible study, something that the Lord's hitting you in the prayer room?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what he's touching you with.
Yeah. I mean, try to articulate as best as I can because I'm still in the process of it.
Yes.
But I think overall, there's just been this burden and hunger for the real thing. Like really encountering the glory of God, the goodness of God, and not being satisfied with going through our days, going through our meetings, because it becomes a rhythm. It becomes the norm. We get familiar with the things, with the language. It's easy to fall into even if our hearts are still loving the Lord and engaged with him to an extent, there's always an element of, it's really easy to fall into professionalism or complacency. Yes. And so I've been feeling the need every day to re-sign up to approaching the Lord and asking for more.
Wow.
Asking for the real thing. Because I've experienced the glory of God before in measures, but I don't want to live off of those experiences.
Yes.
And I know that as glorious as those were, there's so much more. And I don't want to ever feel like I've seen it. I get it. I've had that before. No, there's fresh bread for me today. Bread from heaven. He's alive. He's the bread of life. He's a living bread. And so there's a feast for me today. And then also on the other side of that, it's fulfilling the longing of God, where I have something to bring to the Lord today. Wow. And I need the Lord to touch me so that I can actually love him the way he deserves to be loved.
Yes.
So it's those two things. If I want more of you, but I need you to put more of you in me so that I can actually love you. And so those have been overall burdens of, I want to respond rightly.
Man, we're using these different languages the living bread or heavenly bread, daily bread, all this stuff. Same, we could also interject that or interchange that with the living water.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're pulling from some of the language that even Corey preached on a couple of weeks ago, talking about the woman at the well, talking about how, he's asking us to give him a drink.
Yes.
It's that has been really blowing me away lately, that concept where the God who needs nothing gets thirsty, right? And wants and invites us to give him something, and how we have to like, and even in order for us to give him a drink, we first have to drink from him.
Yes.
Is that kind of like the same vein of what you're getting hit with?
Yeah, I think so. It's like we honestly like really learning to drink. Like, do you know how to really receive from the Lord, to receive the pleasures of the Lord, to receive his words, to like, there's an element, I think, when I think of feeding on him, it's both his presence and his words, that there's the written, the logos word, but that there's also rhema words that he speaks to us daily, like to our hearts, making those words come to life. And also just enjoyment of his presence. And if I'm not legitimately enjoying him, I can't actually give him the drink that he wants. Because he doesn't want the form. He doesn't want the words detached from the heart.
Right.
He wants my heart like on the altar before him.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's absolutely, I cannot love God if God doesn't put his love into me.
Yes. And I think it's so interesting talking about this when we're talking about giving the Lord a drink and ministering to him. I think a lot of people would think about this and they would kind of skip past that. They're thinking about, well, I need to receive so I can give to people.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a real dynamic.
Yes.
And I think, yes, I mean, we don't have, I mean, we can't give to people unless we're receiving from the Lord either. However, we're talking about something before that.
Yes.
It's kind of like I'm hearing as you're sharing the first and second commandment type of thing. You're talking about first commandment.
Yeah.
No, this is before being able to pour out. This is before being able to do the podcast.
Yeah.
Or to do Instagram and TikTok or whatever it is. To be able to preach, whatever it is, that's ministry to people.
Yeah.
But, and we need to drink from him to be able to and we need to eat from him to be able to feed a generation, whatever it is. However, you're talking about ministering to the Lord, and this is what we've both been gripped with so heavily in our lives, where this is first priority.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, man, it was when I first moved to Kansas City. I've shared with this passage with you, but I don't know if I ever shared with the team the story. But I was in the prayer room when I first came to Kansas City to join IHOP U, and I was there. I knew that the Lord had brought me there, but I didn't have like a real, other than, you know, the Lord wanted to make me a shepherd after his own heart. That was something. But I'm like, I got there, I was about 3 weeks in, and I'm like, Lord, what am I doing here actually? And it was about 6:30, 7 a.m. in the prayer room.
Yes.
And this guy in the prayer room came up to me and he was like, hey, write this down. I'm like, okay. So I like grab a piece of paper and a pen and I like write down. He goes, 1 Samuel 2:35. I wrote it down. And he was like, Genesis 28:15. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, here you go, buddy. And he's like, oh, that's for you.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? Like, I wasn't really familiar with this type of even Christianity either. So he's like, that's for you. I'm like, what? And he's like, oh yeah. I've been hearing that for the last hour now, that this was for you.
Wow.
And no, he didn't say hour. He said, I've been hearing this for weeks now. And so he had been seeing me in the prayer room and hearing this. And so then he just leaves. And I'm like, what? And so I open up the scriptures. I'm like, okay, let me look at them. 1 Samuel 2:35, the first one, the Lord is speaking to the priest at the time, Eli, and he's talking about this guy named Samuel who he's about to raise up. And he says, Eli, I am raising up for myself. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest.
Yes.
Who will do what's in
all my will.
Yeah, will do all of my will, do all that's in my heart. He'll know my heart and know my mind. And I will build for him a sure house, and he'll go in and out before my anointed forever. And so I read that, I'm like, geez, I've never read that verse before. So then I flip over to Genesis 28:15. I'm like, what's this one about? And this is the Lord speaking to Jacob. And he's essentially, to summarize it, he says, Jacob, I've brought you to this place and I will not leave you until I've done what I promised.
Wow.
And I felt like though in those 2 verses, the first one, he gave me the blueprint of what he wanted to form in me. And then I felt like he coincided that with this promise, Nathan, I have brought you here to Kansas City, to IHOP, and I will not leave you until I've done 1 Samuel 2:35 in you and form that in you. But what to break that passage down, the blueprint is, I'll raise up for myself a faithful priest. That is someone who ministers to the Lord first, right? And it's in that place that we receive from him, his heart, what's on his mind, right? What's in his word, everything else. And then the next part is, I will build for you a sure house. I always interpreted that as, I will be your provider. I will like make a way for you to live this lifestyle. Yeah. And then the last part of it is, you'll go in and out before my anointed forever. And so it's from this place that you will go out and minister to people. But it's first about ministering to me. And this will be sort of the blueprint of your life, of your ministry going forward. Yeah. And by the grace of God, that's how it has been the last 5 years. And I have every intention of keeping it that way for the rest of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, like listening to you talk about receiving from him so that we could give to him, just like sparked that whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I think too, again, we're focusing on ministry to the Lord in our day to day, but like you said, we can't feed people with him if we haven't been with him. And so, because there's so many voices out there just saying the things, but like in order to have a voice that pierces hearts, like even thinking about preparing sermons and preaching, it's like, I don't want to preach a message that hasn't like gutted me, that I haven't wept over in the place of prayer, that hasn't pierced my heart, because then my word, I mean, like the Lord will still take the word going out and he'll reach people, but there's a kind of voice where it's like your words don't fall to the ground because that reality is alive in you. And that only comes from feeding on him, being with him, ministering to him, receiving from him, repeat, you know? And so I think even before we want to be representatives and ambassadors of the Lord to people, it's like, do you know the one you're representing?
Oh my gosh.
Do you know him? Like really know him, not just know about him. Do you have history with him?
Do you have history with him, but also are you connected with him intimately here and now, presently?
Yes.
Because too many times we want to rely off of whatever encounter we had from the last season, or the intimacy that was there from years ago, maybe when I was in Bible school, when I was at USM, whatever it is. But that doesn't work either.
No. And those things are altars of remembrance, and like you can reference them, but that is not your daily bread.
Oh, like, that's good.
That bread's already been processed. Like you need today's.
Yes. And that's why I love, and I think it's why we love John chapter 6 so much. Because he's talking about, no, you have to eat of me.
Yes. Like you don't eat once and then you're like, I'm good for the next year.
Yes.
Peter Lewis has this illustration where it's like, he talks about like the gospel or Jesus as water. And like when someone's like, you see water, you're not like, I know that. Like I've had that before. Like you need it. Like you have to take a drink.
Yes.
Like you still need it today. You don't just know about water in your mind. Like you still have to consume it to live. And it's the same things, like we have to daily consume the water of his spirit, like of him to stay living, like in a living relationship with the living God. It's daily, not just knowing about, but partaking of.
Yes, we have to continually drink the water. We have to continually eat the bread. Drink his blood, all of that stuff. I've been, and different people, or, the question comes up all the time, like, how do you? How do you eat
what does
of
that
Jesus?
mean?
Like, what does that even mean? What comes to your mind whenever you're like thinking about, what does it mean to consume the Lord? because I think there's a lot of ways you can do it, and I think there's one way that's the most powerful and then like concentrated.
Gosh.
Which is communion.
Yeah. Shouts out.
Right. And even here, we're gonna do a video a little bit later where we take communion and invite people to do it with us. But that's the most, in my mind. We can talk about other ways too, but that's like the most practical and the most concentrated way in which we can consume the Lord.
It's so true.
Because he connects himself to these elements. He doesn't say just, oh, take them in remembrance of me. No, he says, this is my body. This is my body.
Yeah.
This is my blood.
This is the blood of the new covenant.
Yes.
Which right there is like the relational aspect of taking communion, like the blood of the new covenant. Like, do you understand what covenant is? Like union, oneness, like relationship. That is covenant.
Yes.
And so like, I think it's a central piece that I'm in this season really beginning to latch onto and like take in faith as a regular rhythm, because Acts 2 talks about how day by day they gathered and broke bread together, and day by day, like it's a normal everyday occurrence of like coming around the body and blood in faith, believing like all of like forget not his benefits. Like remember the finished work. We proclaim his death until he comes when we take communion. So we're proclaiming what he has done. We're proclaiming the finished work. We're proclaiming the benefits that it brings to us every time we take that meal.
Yes.
And I think that's really beginning to come alive in this season. Like I'm embracing that and learning that.
There's so much that we can say about communion. We're actually going to do a whole kind of 10-minute video on communion and invite people into that. But so that's the most practical way to eat of him, to drink from him, of course. And I'm with you. I've been so provoked in the last 6 months, 10 months of like, I should be doing this every day.
Yeah.
I should be doing this. I mean, shout out to Isaiah if he's listening. He's in the prayer room with us. Such a beautiful man of God. He told me the other day, he's like, I take communion like my vitamins.
No, I've legit been like doing that. I'm like, I really believe that there's health in this cup for me.
Yes.
Like, it's not just a nice thing or like, it's like kind of like a symbol. It's like, no, I actually am like beginning to believe and be convinced that there's life, health, healing, reconciliation in that cup for me daily.
Yes.
And it's been hugely transformative, but we'll go to the other stuff because we're gonna keep getting stuck here.
But, I mean, because we're talking about the revelation of Jesus when we talk about the revelation of communion. And so it is everlasting. But what are some other ways that you think of when you think of like eating and drinking from the Lord?
I think absolutely feeding on his words, like letting his word abide in you. He says like, if you love me, you'll keep my commands, and like let my word abide in you. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And so I think there is like, not in a religious way of, oh God, I have to read my Bible. Like if I don't get in my 5 minutes today, I'm condemned. But like actually believing, again, like all these things hold life for us. Like his words, he has the words of eternal life. Back to that John 6 passage. And it's like, man, like Psalm 119 talks about all these things that the word of the Lord like does for us. And it gives us an anchor when it's like hard, or I don't feel him today in the way I want to feel him, or I'm not crying like the way I did yesterday.
Right.
But it's like this word still holds life for me, and I can cling to it no matter what I'm feeling. That's a huge one for me, is feeding on the word. And then not even just reading it, like inviting the Holy Spirit in when you're reading, asking the Spirit of revelation to bring on things, letting the word become dialogue with God. And then as you're learning these verses and then you're out in the real world and you're confronted with situations where you can let that word abide in you, like, or not, that's huge. Like Romans talks about like the mindset on the flesh is death, but the life or the mindset on the Spirit is life and freedom.
Yes.
And it's like, I've known that for the past 2 years, could quote that to you. But in this season, I'm facing situations where it's like, where am I going to set my mind? Am I going to set it on my flesh and being justified in this and that? Or am I going to let the Spirit of God like reign here? And so I think it's like, you feed on the word, but then you let it like you consume it and you let it be like fleshed out in you.
Yes.
And then learning to drink of his presence. Like, do you know how to sit in a room alone with God, say nothing, and like feel delight?
Wow.
Like,
yes,
man, that's huge.
Wait, I mean, what you're in, to put it in even simpler terms, being with him.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Carving out a time and carving out a place and being with him.
Yeah.
And that can be corporately. You can find
Both,
that
yes.
in both corporately and secret. Yeah, but just being in his presence in an intentional way.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I'm like love language, like quality time is a big one. So I get filled if I'm like, even if we're not doing anything, if I'm sitting in the room with someone I love and we're like silent, like them being there with me,
yes,
like that does something for me. And like, we need to be able to do that with God. Like, your presence is enough. You being here with me, you being close is enough. And he's close in an abiding way. Like, he's in us. And so there's never a time that we don't have access to that life, to that joy, to that communion.
Yes.
And like, I think that choosing to believe and tap into the reality of like, oh man, you're here right now. Like, even now we're talking about him, but if we just stop and we're like, whoa, like, Lord, I acknowledge that you're here right now.
Yes.
Like, just the peace enters in a different way.
Yes.
And change, it can literally switch everything in an instant.
That's so good, Charissa. I'm thinking about other ways too of just feeding on Jesus. Just about even, going through your day and listening to worship music. That's one way to feed too. Listening to sermons and teachings on Jesus too. All those are good. All those feed us, feed our spirits and our ways. I feel like there's different degrees in which is like what's like, I think listening to worship music or listening to a teaching, it's one way to feed off of the Lord. And I think there's like more intense ways too, like, communion is like
fasting.
There's fasting is feeding on the Lord. Wow. I love that you put that one in there.
Yeah.
And there's probably others that are not popping in our head.
I think community too. Like, I'm beginning to, like, I feel like for the first time understand that. Like,
come on.
There's a different glory and grace when we come together as the body and gather around his body and blood. Like, there's life that pops off in ways, and like your brothers and sisters sharing their revelations or their heart on the Lord, like, it encourages you. And you go like, oh yeah, like, that's why if I'm feeling dull and Nathan, you start to talk about like the testimony of Jesus in your life, which is prophecy, like that, my spirit is going to connect and like latch on to what you're saying. And that like jolts me awake again.
Absolutely. Guys, I hope that you're listening to this and you feel just like provoked in your faith. I'm listening. I'm having this conversation first person and I'm feeling stirred. I'm like, man, this is my favorite thing to do. To feed off of Jesus. I mean, we're talking about it, but I mean, like, what actually doing what we're talking about. There's nothing like consuming the Lord as our daily bread, as the bread from heaven, if you will. And I hope, like, you're listening and maybe if you've had questions, what does that mean? We've given a little bit of clarity. We certainly didn't exhaust the subject.
No.
There's so much more. I mean, we're talking about the immeasurable God.
Yes.
With an everlasting invitation into himself. And so, but I want to just give you guys who are listening that mandate to consume the bread from heaven, which is Jesus himself. I'll say personally, everything we listed is what I've wrapped my life around. And I love that we started out with communion. I'm going to, that's a journey I've been on where I'm like taking it more and more.
Yeah.
As much as I think about it. It used to be such a thing where it's just like, well, I'll do it at church service or whatever.
Yeah. Or like this is for special occasions.
Right.
It's such a thing.
No, not at all. I couldn't disagree with that more these days.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the body of Christ is headed.
Yes.
As we have this greater revelation of who he is, I think that it will coincide with the communion revelation as well. But guys, this has been such an awesome episode. I hope that you were provoked in your faith and in your just hunger for the Lord. We're going to be putting out more and more episodes like this.
And if you have questions, like send them in too.
Yes, please feel free to DM us on our Instagram, TikTok, comment on YouTube, whatever else it is. And I do want to mention this episode, by the way, was brought to you by Summer Moon Coffee, which is a partnership that we have here with Heavenly Bread Ministries. They're a coffee shop chain, Dallas, Austin, and Kansas City. If you guys love coffee and you love Jesus, this is like the place to be, guys. Yeah. And I've said this before, I'm not a big coffee guy, but this coffee I legitimately do love. And so that's saying a lot for me.
Yeah, it's good.
But anyways, guys, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Send it to your friends that you feel like would enjoy this and need to hear it. Whatever else, share it on your social media. And tune in next episode. We'll have some more Jesus people having Jesus conversations to provoke greater love for Jesus. So we'll see you next time.